Hi, you guys. Welcome back to Rocket City Yardstead. So today I'm out in the garden working. Um, we've just been in the 90s pretty consistently for the month of June, which has only happened once or twice since I've been gardening. This is my sixth gardening season, and it's definitely hard on the plants. So if you have watched any of my previous gardening videos, you will see that I have these shade cloths throughout my garden. But I have one more to put up today. I have some other things I need to do that are going to help me deal with this heat that we've been dealing with. And I just thought I would show you in particular with this one how I put this up in case it would be helpful for your garden. You're probably familiar with low tunnels, and you will know how people will use those as a way to put bug netting over their brassicas, or they'll put frost netting on their plants to extend the season either earlier in the spring or later in the fall. Well, it occurred to me this year, and so far it's working really well, that maybe I could use some of those low tunnel hoops, attach them up high on my T-posts, and be able to put a shade cloth over. And that's what I've done. It's been up probably about a month now, and it's working pretty well. I'm hopeful. We'll have to see how it goes for the rest of the summer. But so far, it's holding really nicely. So I just thought I'd show you exactly what that system looks like. These are just things I got from Amazon. I can link them in the description below. But I bought this set. You get these fiberglass poles with these metal connectors, and they just slide on and hook together. For these arches, I have 4 poles put together, and then they just bend. And obviously, the more poles, the more of an arch you get. But they also come with these really nice clips that will hold your fabric of whatever kind you're using, whether it's frost fabric or bug netting or shade cloth. And so far, we have had some pretty good winds. Our backyard is very windy, and it has stayed well, my shade cloth, on the arches using these clips. So this is a great idea if you have poles that are close together holding up cattle panels or whatever. It extends the height some and protects your plants. I'm actually really surprised with how hot it is that my cherry tomatoes have still been setting fruit. So I think the shade cloth is working exactly like I wanted it to. If you've watched any of my other gardening videos, then you will have seen these shade cloths. Currently, there are 3 of them. I have a 4th one to put in today, and I thought I would bring you along for that and show you just how easy that is. But the main thing I wanted to talk about was it really is feasible for a home gardener, especially if you're already using cattle panels and T-posts in your garden. On the north side of my north bed, I don't think it shows up very good in the camera, but if you've watched other videos, you will have seen it. I have a cattle panel that runs the length of that bed up on T-posts, and that's where I grow my tomato plants. It's lifted pretty high in the air. I don't know exactly how high. But so on that side, I just attach the shade cloth directly to the cattle panel. And so then that just leaves me with the south side of my south bed to deal with. And so we got 8-foot T-posts and we pounded them into the ground. And then we just attached using the UV resistant zip ties. That's what we used up here to attach the shade cloth, and it works really well. And my plants are thriving. You can see my pepper plants down here. They're so green and lush and covered in peppers. There's no sun scald on my peppers, which typically, if I don't have shade cloth, once we've hit the 90s, lots of ruined peppers from just getting burnt by the sun scald. So this is a great way to help your garden out. And it's really easy. You can buy the shade cloths in all kinds of sizes. Again, I get mine on Amazon, and there's just put in the size you need, and they probably have it, or within a foot or 2 of what you're looking for. But let's get to putting in that last shade cloth. I can't help myself here, though. We got to take a little flower break. These zinnias are just so beautiful. And there's so many of them, and they're filling in just like I wanted them to. I'm still loving the Cinderella peach ones every time I come out here. this one, this is a cactus zinnia that came out of a mixed seed pack, and it is just the most lovely zinnia. I'm going to have to save seeds from that plant this year. But now back to the work. Before I get to putting that shade cloth up, I wanted to show you just exactly why I feel like it's necessary to do it. If you were with me in my last gardening video, then you will have seen that I planted my sweet potato starts. I have been out here, I water them twice a day. They just could not handle this mid-90s heat as starts, and about half of them have died. You can see, looking here in the bed, and the ones that are still alive, they're a little sad looking, but they look like they're going to hold on. But as a result of this heat, I've lost about half my sweet potatoes. Now, I do have more sweet potatoes slips that are actually on sweet potatoes on my back porch that I can pull off and root. And so I'm planning on doing that. And within a handful of days, I should be able to bring them out here and plant them. But I want to get the shade cloth up to protect the ones that are still alive, and then also offer some protection when I do plant those other sweet potato starts. The other thing is the shade cloth will cover both beds. And so it's also going to protect the cucumbers that are actually on this arch here, as well as the tomatoes that are on the north side of the north bed. And so overall, I think this is just going to be a better option for these plants. At first, I was a little unsure about having shade cloth over the sweet potatoes because they do really love the heat, but they just can't take it as baby little plants. The first thing I like to do is stretch the shade cloth all out and just see where I need to put my T-posts. And here I can see that I'm actually only going to need one because I can attach this end down here to that T-post that's already holding up one of my shade cloths. So that's fantastic. That means I'll have an extra T-post if I need it anywhere in the future. I went ahead and did a time lapse here of putting the shade cloth up just so you can see how easy it really is. Over on that side, I'm connecting the shade cloth with the zip ties to the top of the cattle panel and the T-post. And then I throw the shade cloth over this cattle panel arch. And this does take a little bit of finagling just to get it over the top because there's some places where it wants to catch, but it's not too bad. You would definitely need a step stool if you are shorter than me, but more connecting with zip ties, putting up this last T-post. I will say, if you're going to put up any amount of T-posts, you should definitely get a T-post driver. It works wonderfully. But in the long run, this really isn't that much work. It's not that much time. And getting the shade cloth up, if you're hot like it is where I live, is such a benefit to the garden. You can see the new shade cloth is up. I actually bought a different brand this time because it was cheaper and we're all trying to save money. And it looks like it's actually a little bit bigger than my other ones, even though it said it was the same size. So I think I'm going to go get some wire and run it through these eyelets on this end here and try and get it to be pulled out more in line with the two T-posts because I don't like how it's hanging here, and that uncovers part of the bed. So I just have 17 gauge galvanized steel fence wire. This is what I'm going to use. I'm going to try and roll it out to length and then cut it and then just weave it into those grommets and then wrap it around the top of the T-posts. Up behind me, you can see it's a little wavy, but it holds better than it did before. I definitely prefer the other shade cloth and how nice and tight it pulls, but we're not going for perfection. We're going for protection, right? So it's going to work just fine. And pulling that wire snug through there helped tremendously. Okay, so now that the shade cloth is taken care of, it's time to move on to my watering system. I have soaker hoses in my beds, my raised beds and my in-ground garden. The ones in my raised beds are each attached to their own spigot on a 4-way splitter. And everything else I have to move a hose around to connect to. So my plan today is to try and get this automated a little bit better. I found a 4-way splitter that has a timer in it for a much better price than I've ever seen before. And so I got that. And so my goal is to get everything onto 4 different times and be able to let that timer take care of the watering for me. Because when I have to come out here and manually turn everything on, it normally takes me a good 2 hours because I like to let everything water long and slow and really have my roots of my plants sink deep to reach for their water. So I thought I'd bring you along for this because I'm just trying a couple things. I've got a couple of new hoses to try and add into the mix. And if it works, that's going to be fantastic. And maybe it's an idea that would be helpful for somebody. First thing I did to try and get this a bit more automated is I got a 6-foot hose that I have connected to the end of the soaker hose in my south bed. I'm running it over here, and it's still pretty coiled because it's brand new. I'm hoping we can get it sort of flattened out. But I've run it over here and connected it to the soaker hose that runs down my flowers. This will help me with one less zone if it works. So I'm going to turn the water on and go down to the other end of this flower row and see if water makes it all the way to the end of this hose. So you guys, I am super excited to report this is right here at the end of the hose and there is water coming out. So that's one less zone of watering. That hose connecting into my south bed is fantastic news that it works because that means I've reduced my watering zones by 1. So now I have another hose that I'm going to try and add into my in-ground area and see if we can make that be all 1 zone instead of 2. If that works, then we'll be able to water all of the vegetable garden on the 4-way timer. And that will just be a tremendous help for the garden. I'm just going to show you guys what I'm doing here. So I have a soaker hose on my melons. That's a standalone soaker hose. And then over by the beans, there's another soaker hose. And I bought another hose, longer really than I needed, to try and attach these soaker hoses. And we're going to see if this will let it water all the way down to the cherry tomatoes. I'm so hopeful, but I just don't know for sure. So we'll find out. You get the right end of the hose. I will tell you, I could have bought a shorter hose. In fact, I might have been able to have bought one of those 6-foot hoses, but I wasn't exactly sure how much I was going to need. And I figured it was better to have more than not enough. And I looked for a 15-foot hose, which turned out to be much more expensive than a 25-foot hose. So 25-foot hose it is. And part of it will just sit here coiled up, but that's not a huge deal, I don't think. We'll find out soon enough. It could cause problems, just that extra length. But my hose is all attached, so I'm going to go try the water and see if it'll get to the end. Okay, friends, I don't know how well it comes through on the hose, but I am at the very last of the cherry tomato plants, and the hose is wet. It's not a super strong amount of water, so I will definitely have to let this run on the timer for quite some time, but I'm going to call this a success. Just a couple of fun garden goodies here. Nasturtiums hate the heat, but I planted these under the shade cloth, and look, I have my first blooms. Aren't they pretty? One other thing I wanted to show you out here that I discovered while I was putting up that shade cloth. It's the time of year, you guys. You see them right here. It's a hornworm. Means I'm going to have to get out here tonight with my black light and look at all my tomato plants and see if they have any more. Sometimes you can catch them very small with the black light because they glow. I do want to tell you, if you are a gardener and you haven't dealt with hornworms, but you live somewhere that you have them, you also want to check your peppers and your eggplants. The hornworms will eat both of those as well. They just like any of the nightshades. It has been a few days since I got the hoses all situated, and I wanted to water manually for a few days and just make sure that everything was getting as much water as I needed it to. And I'm really pleased with how it's working. So now it's time to add in my 4-way water timer. And so I thought I would bring you along for this. I have already programmed in the first 3, but I thought in case anybody's interested in one of these, I'd show you how easy it is to set it up. And so I'm going to show you how quick it is to set up that 4th timer on here. The first thing we want to do is get the arrow around to start water. And then we pick which zone we want, and I want to set up zone 4. And then we use the plus arrow to set what time we want it to start at. I want it to start at 8:10 p.m. So that's still a.m. Okay, and then we get to pick for how long it's going to water. I am going to go with 20 minutes. And every other day. That's how simple it is. The 4-way splitter is all set up now. There was a moment, I'm not going to lie, where I was really nervous. When I turned the water on, every hose came on, even though it was set to auto, and I was really worried it wasn't going to work. But I turned every single one of them on to manual for just 1 minute, and they all shut off after that, and none of them are running now. So this evening we'll come back out here when it's supposed to kick on and start watering all of the beds, and we'll see how it does, and I'm very hopeful. So I'll see you back here then. I heard my water kick on in the house. I can actually hear it. The spigot runs right behind the wall that I was sitting next to. And so I came out here to just check and make sure things are running. And one of my beds is watering right now, and I looked at the timer. There's just a few minutes left on it, and then it should switch to a different bed. So I'm going to hang around and make sure that works. Here you can see it's showing me that it's on zone 1, and it has 2 minutes to go on its watering and what the current time is. So here in just a minute, it should switch over and show me that zone 2 is watering. I'm just trying to catch when the switchover happens, which should happen at 7:30. There it happened. Zone 2 for 20 minutes. Fantastic. So it's working just like I wanted it to. The 4th timer is just about to finish running, and all of the beds have been watered. They look really great. And so I think I've done everything I can to really heat proof this garden. Between the shade cloths and the automated watering system, I think it's going to be really beneficial to the garden. So I hope you found something useful here, maybe something you could implement in your garden. But whether that's the case or not, just thanks for being here. I'm grateful, and I will see you next time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.